Let's start, and we're on.
Yeah, all right. Hey, Isabel.
Hi, welcome to Synergy.
Howdy.
And we got guest Nick from the Subjective Perspective show, whose show we were just on.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, right, Nick?
Yeah, you guys were incredible. It was a dang privilege having you both on because the conversation was just so dynamic. And honestly, it's why I do what I do. I love doing what I do because you get to connect with like-minded people that are really insightful, and individuals that are abstract thinkers, people that think outside the box. And it was a blast. And you guys, we went 45 seconds before my time ran out, actually, on our web server, because we have like 3 hours a lot of time for the show. So it was cool, man. I've only done that like 3 times.
It was so much fun, and we had so much fun that we wanted to continue the conversation here on our podcast. So it was really great. It was an honor to be on your podcast, so a radio show. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It was this is episode number what for us, Isabel?
14.
14.
Yeah.
All right.
When Lee comes back in, when Lisa TSP comes back in, I'll ask her to see who our number 14 was, what our episode was. We're at 131, and that's crazy.
The Subjective Perspective. Yeah.
The Subjective Perspective show. So we have the music duo, The Subjective Perspective, which is Lisa and myself, my wife and myself. And we've been rocking and rolling, doing that since like 2011.
Okay.
Playing music our whole lives prior, but then we made the show in 2013. So it's been for like roughly 5 years. Actually, 5 years. This August 13th-ish.
Really?
Are we?
Wow.
No, it's not the 13th. Yeah. No. Coming up with
a
couple days.
It's 8/8.
It's 5 years. This is cool. This is very cool to be able to do this.
Very cool. So yeah, we always have our guests when we have guests on pick the word of the day. And Nick, what word have you come up with?
So I was thinking, y'all, about two different words, and I was gonna go first with like the bigger word, the one that probably made me sound a lot smarter, and the one that made me look a lot more cooler. But that was metacognition. And that's just the idea of thinking while you think, but I decided to go with what we had mentioned off air, the word simple. And for many reasons. So the word of the day here for episode 14, which I'm very excited to be part of here, is for me going to be simple.
Simple. What was the other word, just off chance?
Metacognition.
Oh, metacognition. Okay.
That's the idea of thinking essentially why you're thinking, being immersed in the thought process, and really being aware of what direction you may take next with your decision making. So it's very interesting. It's very cool. But I think we can get there with the word simple also.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
I love it. That's
why
I wanted to know. Yeah, it's almost like to the mind, you're talking two opposites. But really, I don't think that I can find anything in the world that really is opposites.
Yeah, that's right. And it's funny because our last guest, who was Chris Burns, also had 2 words. So it's interesting how it's unfolding. And for me at the beginning, they were not connected, but he started explaining, and all of a sudden I saw the connection. So I'm really excited to hear about what simple means for you.
Thanks. And Wayne, I apologize. When you were just speaking, a phone call was coming in because I'm using my phone. So if it blanked out by any chance on your side, I apologize. There was like the last couple words, I missed what you said, brother, and I apologize.
Oh, yeah. I noticed that you disappeared. Yeah, it was just I was saying that I don't know that I believe in opposites anymore. I can't seem to actually narrow things down to one is a stark reality and the other is a stark opposite reality, no matter what we're talking about in life. So while we're saying that the mind is maybe saying metacognitive is one and then simple is a complete opposite, I'd be interested as we go along to see if we uncovered more similarities than opposites with those two.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah.
But yeah, so Isabel, what do you think of when you think of simple?
For me, it brings like an inner peace. It's like, it's more an emotional reaction to the word. It's like what I want to do is like, this feels great. Like that's exactly what comes to mind. And
Yes,
I resonate with that. And a few years back, before I moved to here, Portland, Maine, I sold my house, I sold everything, and I moved into a tiny little apartment, which for me was the beginning of a simple life. And I just love it. So it brings me back to that. And it kind of brings it back to reality too.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Isabel, because the idea that we wanted in our life to live simple, to live austerely, because we grew up in a part of New York, on the South Shore of Long Island, a very working class area, and we seen a lot of mayhem at an early age, which was socially normalized. So you didn't realize while you were immersed in it that you were immersed in craziness, because everybody from every genre, from every background was doing what they were doing. It's like, in New York where we grew up, it didn't matter what you looked like. It didn't matter what your background was. If you were able to talk the talk, you were able to walk the walk with everybody. You know what I'm saying? And at 40 years young, y'all, I've grown in so many ways. At one point, walking the streets of New York with friends, and growing up, walking those streets of New York, and really immersed in a different time period in America, when America was, I felt a bit more, I want to say, gritty and raw. And a time period where we weren't documented 24/7. So as we were talking on the show, we got into on the Subjective Perspective show. It's fascinating, what life would have been like if all of this was where we were in the 1990s. Wow. So that's why it's a very near and dear to my heart where I grew up, because where we've come, where we are now, is such a huge accomplishment that we want everyone to realize that they can go out and be the manifestors of what they see up here, both good and bad. But keeping it simple. Sometimes just having that focus, staying very, not too hyper focused, but staying, immersing yourself in that moment, in the thought of what you want to be in your life every day. One day it becomes us, and it could be good and it could be bad. It's what we have. It's those images we hold.
Yeah, I love that. What does it mean for you?
For me, well, I guess like if I were to say, there's probably a million examples. If I asked an NFL player, is football simple? They'd probably say yes, in its complexities, right? But for me to play football on the level that they play football would be a very complex process. And, or for me, mysticism is simple, but I don't have to try, and I didn't even know that about myself. But if I had asked the version of me who was 40 years old versus the 48-year-old self now, if mysticism was something simple or complex at the time, it was fucking so complex, there was no way I could have ever imagined what that would be like. And nor would I imagine that my life would pull me that direction without me even trying. So, and just in the process of understanding the things that I do now from what we call mystic sense, it's very simple to me. It's so simple that it makes me laugh, but trying to operate with that simplicity within me in a world that finds that sort of information complex, arcane, metaphysical, whatever, I find challenging. So, and then I'll have these little breakthroughs, like a release here or release there of old energy stuff, and then it becomes even more simple than it was before. But up until it was simple, it was fucking hard. And I think that's the same with anything. Like to an incredible wizard, an incredible mathematical wizard, You know, like math is probably
Oh, that was close.
complexity.
That was crazy.
Yeah, I'm having a nice lightning storm and thunderstorm.
I heard that. That was crazy.
That's why I see the flash in it, so it's like right overhead. I see the flash and then the sound is right behind it. But it's kind of funny timing too. But yeah. I would say that there's no way it comes down to maybe what you say on the subjective perspective show. Just the title itself, Nick, is that everything is subjective to your perspective, and so. And in life, we get the gift of multiple perspectives if we allow ourselves, or we could just really fine tune and say, we're going to have one path in our life. We're going to be a fireman from the age we're 5 years old. We know we're going to be a fireman. We drive ourselves towards it. We become a fireman. We retire as a fireman. Maybe we go travel and live a retirement life after that. Was that simple or complex? I don't know. You'd have to ask the person. But you know, to some people, it's that linear, and they may gain a few perspectives along the way, or they may be what we call tunnel vision and myopic the whole way. But either way, was it hard or easy? I mean, it's just dependent upon the person, you know? Yeah. So everything, it's so subjective. What is easy for me in the metaphysical realms, literally almost nobody understands. Well, you know, it's like the information in Wizard of Oz. It's like the Oz behind the veil. That, you know, that little dude has all the information. Everybody else is making things so complex, but it's not that complex, you know.
And I feel like the biggest the biggest questions that we have, like life's biggest mysteries. You know, why are we here? You know, what is this all about? You know, what is this? What are the planets? You know, all this really interesting stuff. What is the solar system, the universe? I feel like if we could boil it down to I think that's where it's going, to its most simplest, purest form and essence of what we are trying to convey in our intention of really understanding. That's when perhaps it presents itself. Now, we were talking about this on the Subjective Perspective show. You know, Wayne, you're right, brother. You know, this is about a multitude of perspectives. And this is about realizing that no one person has this thing all situated. That we aren't, that it takes everybody to equal one. All perspectives, the good, the bad, or everything in between. And by understanding those perspectives, by being able to empathize, not having to live per se in the shoes of somebody who's done bad, but to understand why whether it's the behavioral conditioning, whether it's the, whatever forces are at work. This is, I believe, what allows somebody to grow within themselves. And it's simple in a way, because we say to ourselves, well, that really just requires living. That requires being alive and speaking with people, knowing about other people's lives. But we're so taken by the media, and the media has a way of, how would I say it, hypnotizing us into seeing ourselves certain ways, seeing the world in a certain way, that I think it's important for everybody to turn off for many hours, many hours, maybe turn on for a moment, but live life organically. And I think getting back to those simple times is where that the progress of the future will be. In the simplicity, we've gotten pretty complex in this technology, and in thought, we've gotten very complex. But there is something magical about those simple energies, the time periods where people may not have been ignorant, but truly chose to live simply. To put it in the context of our word of the day.
And it's interesting because I'm starting to see the connection with your second word. It all starts from your mind, right? Like, it all starts from your perspective.
Yes.
Huh.
Yes.
It is, and I don't think the average human understands how much of our reality is just fabricated from our mind. Like, because to know the vast reality of that would be to reduce, and it reduces life to, in film terms, to a green screen, to where you just have this background of green, and then you superimpose all this stuff that looks like it's real on top of it, so that you have the actors running around in front of this green screen, but you really think they're in the jungle somewhere, or they're on a motorcycle chase somewhere, you know, and all they're doing is acting in front of this green screen, going through the motions, but they're not out in the jungle. They're not out on the streets, you know, like, so like the mind thinks that's super complex to wrap itself around, and that's counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. But the truth is totally opposite. That the green screen effect, that the counterintuitive part is actually how we are able, through a collective mind and a collective agreement that grows through millions and billions of people, to agree upon, cars and buildings and food storage and world hunger and all this stuff. Like, no, those are the reality. Well, but they're not the reality to everybody. Not even world hunger. And not even the world being round or whatever, oval shaped or whatever. Like, nobody, not 100% of anybody agrees on anything, which is the beauty. And that's actually true. There's no one way of understanding anything.
That's right.
And that's what I understand from what you were saying, Nick, about like the news and the media. They have the capacity to bring together that collective mind. So if we're all listening to something, we have the capacity to bring that green screen to manifest or certain reality. So I find that interesting. And I heard something from both of you and Nick, is that for you, it seems like life has gotten more simple. Do you find that's a historical perspective too? Like, do you see our world getting more simple?
I think that we are, personally, I think I've created a reality that's more simplified, unplugging for many hours, being focused on, focusing my energy on certain things I want to manifest around me, by not just thinking about it, by actually working towards that, whether it's making phone calls, whether it's, putting resumes places, things of that nature, having things happen. And so in that regard, it's been more simple because economically, you have less economic depression, not in terms of the societal Great Depression in 1929, but in terms of the depression one can feel if they are economically squeezed. And growing up where I grew up, that is a commonplace feeling for the predominance of the area outskirt in New York City. People are paying high prices, many times low quality in fruits and vegetables, due to it being transported really many times from the West Coast or from the South, and going bad due to climate reasons. But this is why, when I think about how the idea of why we become who we become is so pervasive into my thought process. Where I came from, I had lived that life of feeling those feelings. But for people that feel like that, I want them to understand that that won't be their future. It really depends on the power that you want to control in your life and the amount of energy that you want to have. Because as it was said in one of those documentaries I had seen years back, it's that thought process, it's the way that we speak to ourselves that has to filter out all of the outside talking. It's that inside talking within our own thought process that we have to hold dear to. So if we see ourselves as being a lawyer, a doctor, a shaman, somebody who is a world traveler, a rock star, whatever it is, it's those thoughts which correlate with our actions that really bring that about. So it's 100% what you both have said. And that's why I think you two, there's a big picture that we're a part of. Mm-hmm. And we're having this ability to do this and to have this beautiful conversation, which will reach people. This will definitely reach people. Mm-hmm. And people will realize that they have the ability to do what we're doing also. That opens up this thing they call perspective. And for me, just to bring it back to the point in question, it's become simple in the way where I feel like I have control. But it's complicated, as you both know, with what's going on around us, whether it's politically, whether it's sociologically, looking at the veils of media and how that has, taken people for a loop. Not all media is bad, not all news is fake at all. So I don't want to be one of those people, Steve, but making the point that there are neurological impacts in the way that we take media, whether it's through pro-social conditioning, pro-social media and the way that conditions us, more of the positive stuff, more of the education stuff, which was passed by Congress towards the mid to late 1900s, that, there had to be a certain amount of time where there was some kind of educational programming. So, but as we know, with the rise of the internet, if a child is not monitored, they can be taken any direction, which is where that whole idea of it takes a village comes into play. So sort of bringing it back to the simple idea of, we got to be each other's brothers' keepers and sisters' keepers. We have to be those individuals that want to see, as not to be cliche, that change, as Gandhi made the point, that we want to see. We have to be, but it really is true. We have to go out there. We have to be kind. We have to go out there. We have to be the people that are inclusive. We have to be the people that we want to see people be, because we are those people in essence.
This reminds me of Isabel and I, why we started the podcast, because we had a conversation about Isabel, we were talking about back in February or March of 2018, and now it's August of 18.
Yeah.
We were talking, I think about the way we were both getting a little fired up about the way women are acting as if they're victims in the world somehow. And how that's a spiritual enlightenment to say that women are victims, and a couple other things. But I remember, Nick, you were talking about socioeconomic, and I think, that's one of the things that's a hot topic these days in the world of paying attention to the world, and is women's empowerment. And Isabel and I had a different way. Like, people are making it a little too complex. But Isabel, I don't remember.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was at that time of the hashtag Me Too, I think. That's why we started that conversation. And for me, it brought me back to think about the whole aspect of it. And I don't necessarily want to bash the idea behind, but at the same time, I could use that hashtag Me Too. Like, I would be the perfect candidate, but I didn't feel the need to express that, because for me, it's an internal job. And that's why for me, it's simple. Like, I don't need to express it to the whole world. I need to deal with it internally. It's my own personal journey and story. And whoever needed to be involved in the conversation had been involved in the conversation. So I faced the aggressor. Like, I did everything that for me was healing. And I think I see that a lot in the world right now, because when we started the podcast, there was a lot of screaming about our president, right? So all those pieces. And for Wind and I have to admit that originally that was triggering, that was difficult. But when it came to reality, it was simple. It's so true, because it brought to light what needed to heal within me. And that's what life, I feel like the more I realize what it's all about, it's so simple. Like, but yet we love making things complex, right? We love categorizing, we love formulas, or we love complicated stuff. And
I think it ties into, like, I don't really watch them, but I know I've seen a few TED Talks, for instance, that are real popular. We all know who they are. Women or men who have been victims of human trafficking, for instance, right? Snatched from wherever they're from and forced into a life of forced labor and sexual acts, right? There's people who have come out of that, and the common thread in the ones who have survived and have been able to start to communicate about it is the same formula as it is with anything else in any other struggle in life. The common thread really is the same at the core. How did you survive that struggle? I mean, if you ask any human being how they survived any of us, however we survived whatever struggle or struggles that we've gone through, it's always the same thing. Well, a recognition that somehow you had it within you to overcome the situation you were in. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just had to be patient and believe long enough that you were capable of living a different way. And then be open to however that opening, that escape from whatever your situation you're in to arrive and know how to act when it was there. But the truth is that escape is always actually there. It's always there. Sometimes it might take a series of events physically, but those physical events will come as quickly as the mind says, I'm ready to be out of this situation.
It's your green screen.
It's always perspective. It's never like you never actually signed up for a life of servitude. You only signed up for a life of understanding servitude. Mm-hmm. And if you choose at some point in that life to escape servitude of a severe magnitude, if like in human trafficking, or some people will say religion is a severe servitude. Some people will say political governance is a severe servitude, or taxation, or whatever, you name it, but it always comes down to a state of mind. And at any given time, you are allowed an escape out of that, which takes you back to the Buddha or to the Christ teachings. You never have to be subject to the perceived oppression. And that's why media is so strong, because it continues to feed the machine of perceived suppression. And that's the only reason it's strong. And the only reason you need to not pay attention to media is to know that there is an escape outside there and to look for that escape. But that escape is only going to come from inside you. And it comes down to any person, including people who are in genocidal countries or in human trafficking situations. It's across the board the same answer all the time. What do you have in you, and how ready are you to be free? And if for some reason you don't see the signs, the doors that get you out into the physical freedom, you could still find the freedom inside, because nobody will ever own that part of you inside.
That's so beautiful. And it connects so much with the kids that were stuck in the cave, right?
Yeah. Yes. And I think of, it's interesting, you think of the people in North Korea and what we know of how they've been conditioned, essentially brainwashed, right? So it's that inner self that many, roughly 20,000 perhaps, have defected from North Korea to South Korea, made it across somehow the 30th parallel. And, that's that stuff that when you're talking about, brother, that's that inner stuff, that inner self, that inner psychic ability to manifest your own self-image. Because when we're born, many would say that we're born with everything in us already, and as we grow, it sort of comes out, and this human shell dissipates. Others say that we learn in life, right? And we learn who we are. We learn who we're going to want to be based on what we see. So I'm not saying I take either stance, because quite frankly, I'm one of those people, as I mentioned earlier, that know that there's a multitude of perspectives. And the truth, unless that's shown to me, and truth can be totally flipped upside down, as you both know that in life. You can believe one thing at the basic principle of the whole idea of Santa Claus, right? Or the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy. And some, a kid could believe that until they're shown, hey, listen, there's no such thing. That could be devastating. Or it could be something that we mature to understand through this organic perception of life and what's in our life. But what could that mean for the future now? There's these two books, y'all, that I just found out about. And they're by a fella named, I'm not going to do justice to his name, Ingersoll, 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 Lockwood. And he wrote these two books, one titled The Marvelous Underground Adventure or Journey of Baron Trump. Okay, this is all in the 1890s.
Okay.
The sequel to this book, published like 1898, something like that, 96, 98, is titled 1900 or, so that is the actual title, 1900 or The Last President. Now, in these books, the characters, and it's, you guys got to check this out. Lee and I just did a little research, things happened, saw this, found out about this, and there's a whole lot of people who see this, and it's in the Library of Congress. It's for real, double-checked it all. Everything's there, and it's crazy because you have the character who is Baron Trump, who's guided by someone named Don, and it gets crazy. They want to leave a land called Goggle, which many infer that that's Google, and there is, it's so crazy. Oh, there's some other crazy stuff that's associated with all of everything in these two books. Oh, and the second book takes place, the first book starts out in Russia. Okay, so it brings it all right there. Second book starts out in New York City in November, after a contested election by an outsider on Fifth Avenue. That's where Trump Towers is. One of Trump Towers is on Fifth. One of Trump Towers is one on Columbus Circle, and other one by West Side Highway. I know that because I lived out there. But but that's two books, y'all, that have been written, that were written in the 1890s by Ingersoll Lockwood. And so Google it. Take a moment if you like. It's crazy.
Goggle it.
Goggle it. Exactly, brother. Exactly.
It's funny because I read something very similar about the Titanic. There was a book that was written before, and it's a similar connection to the reality that happened. It's fascinating.
Wow.
It does.
Wow.
I think if we would allow ourselves to understand, as I've come to see, if we'd allow ourselves to see the Fibonacci circle, the golden spiral, whatever you want to call it, at its kind of smallest, like whatever we can grasp, we'll see that everything is repetitive.
Yeah, it's a cycle.
And this is how, if you were a mathematical mind, this is how early mystics and prophets were able to see. And you're talking now, you could even talk civilizations that had nothing to do with each other, as far as we are able to tell, across the globe. We're all somehow able to predict that the world would be at 2012 where it is now, and 2012 and beyond, and and other events, because all you got to do is read the pattern in a small way and know what's possible, and then have some guided insights. There's no way that they had iron birds flying back then, the plane, but they had enough, and maybe probably a lot of guided information that would tell them these things are going to occur. However, so it doesn't take much to figure out the cyclical nature of all things. That's the nature of all things. It doesn't take much. That, to me, that's simple, but to almost any other mind, it's impossible to comprehend and to grasp.
Yeah,
so I get that I'm communicating to an audience, that listeners that may not grasp this, but it's super fucking simple. So it doesn't take much to be a prophet at all. And on top of that, but then there's other guided informations of knowing what will come. Now, so here's the beauty, though, is you can predict all these things, and you can see these overlapping. So the books you're talking about are playing themselves out clearly, right? But what happens is we get stuck in fear. We get stuck in the fear of our mind, of the sky is falling. And for thousands of years, humans have been saying the sky is falling. It hasn't fucking fallen yet. It's not going to fucking fall. And so you remove the fear, and then you can actually ascertain better outcomes, because all you have to do is remove fear of anything and judgment and anger. And then the possibility of that cyclical nature can actually expand beyond this sort of limited scope. So you can see replaying of things. We see it all over the place. We know historically there's lots of replays going on that are like too uncanny to grasp. But the way out of those things become always remaining inside the box is to remove fear. And the simple way, to keep using the word simple, is actually to reduce fear. The hard way, the metacognitive way in your juxtaposition, is how do I remove enough fear to allow, and most people are like putting the cart before the horse. Well, the world needs to change before I'll find inner peace and before I'll show up as my best self. Well, that's just you being an asshole. You know, because the world is not going to change until you stop being a fucking asshole.
That's right. That's right.
And that doesn't apply to Trump. That applies to the Trump fucking opponent. That applies to the person who says they're oppressed because of Trump, even though they're 40 years old. Trump didn't fucking press them since they were like born. You know what I mean? And he's not oppressing them now. So the metacognitive process has overcomplexified the whole deal, and like it's that's the fun of being human, if you will, for the time. But then it's actually not fun for anybody anymore to live in this drama. So now we're in this cycle again. And if you want to if you only wanted to say it's based, if you only wanted to base it off the two books, Nick, that you just talked about, versus where we are now, we could just say it's time to break out of that cycle. Well, how do you break out of that cycle? You have an inner shift that brings you a connection to enough peace to know that you don't have to live in fear and drama, and know that when you do experience fears and dramas, it's your responsibility perpetually to release each fear and each dramatic tendency that you have, no matter what is happening around you. And this is why I don't watch media, not because it's almost stupid. I almost feel like I'm sitting in a kindergarten playground when I watch what people talk about in the world, watching a bunch of kindergartners who can't get along. It's like, okay, I'm done. And like, I don't need to watch that anymore. I've watched that for enough years. Now I'm going to go out and actually show myself what it's like to live peacefully. And the more of us that do that, the more we show a way out of that tight circle that won't seem to expand.
That's right. I was going to say that when, there's a duty that we have, as I was, making that point earlier. It takes a village. There's what the media portrays reality to be. Then there's reality. It's always wild, to see those pieces of literature and to see things play out, like 1984. Just to see those prophecies, those prophetic words play out, and you think to yourself, wow, what was it? What was it that they saw that others may not have seen? And it goes back to your point, Wayne. It's that formulaic aspect of life, the pattern that we all live within. And when one sees the pattern, one is able to predict. But the thing is, it becomes eerily uncanny when they start putting names on these things. You know what I'm talking about? And it's like, wait a second, man. You're talking 1890s and you're talking Barron Trump? Don? This is some crazy stuff. So now, with that said, it goes back to us going into the community, us being those purveyors of ideas that will allow other members of the community, doesn't matter if they're young, doesn't matter if they're old, but people to seek their own internal truth. And when people start to seek that, that's when all of the external nonsense falls at the wayside. I think, though, what happens is this. I think we've lived in a culture of a media-driven society for the last, let's say, at least 40 years, hardcore, right? Since the 80s, massively hard with the fantasy machine, the fantasy industrial complex, right? With all of Hollywood, with all of the advertisements and the branding and what that had imbued in our consciousness to turn us into who we are today. Because we are not who our parents were, and our parents are not who their parents were, right? But there's such a big disconnect now between this generation and my family's generation, where my family's generation could build a house with their bare hands. This generation, it's been a generation immersed in technology. So they'll be the genius thinkers of ways that we can create a house, maybe not with our bare hands, but with some other means. So it's a
3D photography or 3D printing.
3D house.
Yes, exactly. So there's a beauty on both sides. The grass is greener, as they say. So I'm not to knock either generation, but there is something within that simplicity that I think we all have to really get back to, and that's living off of our own means, whether it's farming, whether it's knowing how to map out a direction. It's wild to think how many people would have a hard time even going out into society, who have been so immersed in the complex that they have based on the way the media is, the way the media portrays reality. There's a lot to be said about taking life into your own hands and really being the director of your life, rather than somebody else coordinating what our thoughts are. And that's the simplicity of it, is just being in control of your life. But I guess it's complex to get out and to deprogram what we've already been programmed to see in this world. And that once that happens, once the deprogramming happens, it can get a little intense for people. It could feel like, well, wow, this reality is not what I thought it was. And to say, just waking up to an understanding of politics. There's some people that are under the false assumption that any politician has their best interest at heart. Some do, some don't. Just like everywhere else, people are people, So we have to look at this as an issue that we have the perspective, or we have the ability to control our perspective, rather than having the media tell us, this is what's good for you. Now take it and eat it and think it and be it. And then by the time maybe in your late teens, you look back and you say, wait a second, I don't feel right. In your 20s, wait a second, I don't feel right, man. Something's just not adding up. I'm doing what they're telling me, but it's just not working. It doesn't feel like it's me. And we have to get back to who we were, as they say, before they told us who to be. The time of discovery. We talked about that on this show, the Subjective Perspective show. The discovery mode, the ability to be free. And I think that's what everybody wants, but people get strangleheld by whether it's the external forces of bills, the holes that they dig for themselves with any social aspect. Could be drugs, could be alcohol, could be anything, not even that. Could be gambling, it could be too much of anything, too many, what do I like to eat here, sweetie? What do I like to eat a lot of today? Chicken franchise. I love eating chicken franchise. If I eat too much of it, I'm gonna start looking like a little lemon. You know what I'm saying? I gotta chill, and I gotta do it in a little moderation, as they say. But it's me taking control of that. And that's, I think, the simplicity of it all. Bringing it back to that point. And it's not easy. So people listening in, say to themselves, well, I'm doing all the right things. I'm doing what I'm told. That's good. And if it feels good, that's right. But if it doesn't feel right, then follow your heart. And do what you got to do in your life to feel fulfilled. And that's really
I feel like Isabel has a really good, probably out of the three of us, probably a more dynamic perspective. Now, I've lived in a lot of countries, but Isabel is from French Canada. And so you have two different social systems that you've lived under. And, just based off a lot of this, you've already experienced at least two different realities in the world. You know?
And what you're talking about, Nick, for me represent true empowerment. And that is so important, because the opposite, listening to others or going against who you truly are is what the society seems to have adopted as a norm. What it seems, maybe not everywhere, but where I'm from, you're right. We have this, what they call a duality, where there's French and English. And if you don't speak English, you'll probably will never leave the community you're in, which is not a bad thing. For some people, it's their truth. It's what they love, and it's okay, and it shouldn't be criticized. But for some people like me who left and had to learn English, had to be immersed in English, and fully got immersed only back in 2009, I was a lot criticized for being bilingual, because from the French community, they would criticize me for being integrated in another culture and losing my French. For the English community, they were saying I was stealing their job because I was bilingual and capable of giving a lot more skills. So I never really fitted, which was always bizarre for me, because for me, it was just exploring the world, and it was fantastic. And I never saw anything negative from the English community or the French community. So for me, I decided to leave because that perspective did not fit my green screen. It was just not there. And then now I'm in Portland, Maine, and I'm as successful as I always been, but yet life is so simple, and I truly enjoy. And it's funny that you bring that up, Wynn, because last week I was renewing my newsletter, and somebody decided to remove themselves from the newsletter. And in the comment, it says, "I'm so disappointed in you because I thought this would be in French."
Oh, interesting. Wow.
And it was like, wow. And it made me realize, like, I don't miss that. Like, I don't miss that stuff. So I don't miss that perspective. Instead of, like, for me, it's always been, if something is in English or in Spanish or whatever language and it's great, I'm going to love it. I'm going to appreciate it, right? If there's this movie on TV that is in Chinese, I'm going to get the subtitle. I'm not going to send a message to the director for not making it in English or French, right? And that's, for me, it's like, wow, this is your truth. This is what you sent to the world. And look at this, like French, English, wherever you are, whatever language you speak, you can embrace it and enjoy it. And I love that idea of speaking your truth, because for me, that is true empowerment.
I remember when Allison and I 2 years ago started to put out that we both received guided information, that we were supposed to open our relationship. And we also identify as a twin flame relationship. A lot of people started to, like, that had been following us or whatever, started to act like a cat on ice or something, like freaking out. And like one woman who I think lives in New York, had the audacity, I should say audacity, but in her mind, she thought we had the audacity to do something that was totally appalling. And so she decided to send a message. I had already felt like I needed to disconnect from her energy. So I separated from her personally on Facebook. And then she sent Allison a message. And it was just like this long, like, kind of, how dare you guys? Like, that the world needs us to be leaders in the righteous movement, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's crazy that people
we had nothing we could say, because all she was doing was inviting an argument. So there's really, we were the ones locked into a corner in terms of dialogue, but she had already locked herself into a corner with thought and belief. And what she thought a spiritual evolution looked like. What the spiritual evolution really is, returning to our simplistic roots. And if you go back into history at all, anthropologically, you'll discover that marriage is a new thing. Marriage is a thing based on reproduction, one male, one female, reproduction, so that your society, your tribe, your village could grow and survive, that your children would always have a safe place, and that you could always be able to continue to maintain your way of life, which involved hunting or foraging or both or whatever, whatever the values were. That's all marriage ever really was. It was never meant to be the divine fucking law of the universe between one man and one male and one female. And the law of the universe is that everything goes. What are you happy with?
Right, exactly. It's what you connect with. Because in nature, there is animals that live together with one mate their whole life. There's others that have different mates. There's others that don't even have mates and lay eggs. I learned that about the Komodo dragon this week.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's true, because quite frankly, you know, it's for anybody to pass judgment is somebody who doesn't see within their own self the truth, right? And they haven't been on that journey, because that journey takes a lot of the paradox that you know, we may have thought when we were younger, and it, you know, it removes it. It says, hey, listen, you know what? You are somebody who is flawed. You know, when you say to yourself, oh, why, I was mentioning the paradox, you know, why do I feel like I'm not doing the right thing when I'm doing what society tells me? You know, when you're on that journey, you realize, you know, it's okay to be flawed. It's okay to have, you know, been somebody who has, you know, been conditioned by society and may have, you know, I don't know, lied to your parents or whatever it is, you know, and to not judge yourself, but to see oneself as a work of art, as a journey that we're on. And I think it's one of those things, y'all, that, okay, so check this out. It really brings me back to the point that, you know, we as humans, living simply, for roughly 95% of human existence, until the Neolithic age, which is what, the last couple thousand years, and we became these complex, you know, life forms, these complex Homo sapiens, and it's one of those ideas that, well, there's something magical that's happening. There's something magical that has happened, something magic happening in the moment right now, and to be aware of that magic, not to be able to define it, not to be able to say this is what it is, but to say I'm part of something beautiful, and then to go out there and to spread that word. Aldous Huxley, a great writer, made a point that the secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm. You know, and I think that's so true. That's genius. You know, if you can, you all have met people in their 80s and their 90s, and it's those people that make me feel like I'm, you know, tired. The people that are constantly, you know, thinking on fire. That's the stuff that makes me say, hey, you know, life has beauty when we want to see it every day of our life. What the future holds for humans, if we can prolong our consciousness, or if we can shift our thought process somehow, that database into a finite, infinite form, not infinite form, into a body that is made of metal, let's say. That's stuff that they're talking about, stuff that they're working on. And it makes you think, you know,
I really want to.
Are we on the tip of something brand new, and are we the biological species as we know it? Are we on our way out?
Yeah, well, yeah, we are. And you know, the interesting thing you said, Nick, about the carrying the inner child with us. Well, the Dalai Lama is like the perfect example of carrying the inner child with you. He still gets a little tired and fatigued, whatever. But I mean, the dude is like the biggest public figure that we have that carries the inner child, you know, and openly, and that's so, like, he shows that he's still not disengaged from the world. He's not just going out and playing. He also says that I think this is the last time the Dalai Lama needs to incarnate on the planet. I should be the last one. China has something else to say about that. We own you, motherfuckers. So we're going to tell you if you can incarnate again. And they don't even believe in reincarnation. Bastards. But anyway, it's like, you know, he recognizes that the need for whatever the Dalai Lamas have carried up until this point is no longer there. So there's one example of, the future, the tomorrow human is definitely going to be a very more open human. It's in the consciousness. We already know this. But, you know, the other thing about that is, like, I would challenge that each person that's sitting there yelling and criticizing Trump is it's their own inner wounded child yelling at this president who's obviously got a strong inner wounded child. And they're yelling at him to be the one to fix their fucking problems that they need to take ownership on. And Obama comes along and he didn't fix anybody's inner child. So the next Democratic president isn't going to fix anybody's inner child. It's all about you. So it really is about the inner child. There's nothing else it's about. The inner child knows how to be present and play in a way that we complexify ourselves out of as we get older and more mature and more adult, And so the challenge, I would challenge anybody who ever has anything negative to say about somebody like Trump or Bush before. Like, if you have something negative to say about them, you're complaining simply from your wounded inner child to this person who represents an inner wounded child on a public level. And they're not going to fix it because you are now adding to the venom that they already carry by criticizing them. You're already like shooting at them what got them there to begin with. So that's not going to fix anything. If you want to fix that as a society, as a world, you got to return to that within yourself. And you don't just give this condescending love from a place of not having to love yourself. It doesn't fucking work. I'm one of those guys. I'm one of those conservatives turned into a mystic on accident. It wasn't, well, not on accident, not a universal accident, but not by my mind. I was completely like them. I could look around and say, you are a fucking stupid human. Like, you do the inner work to fix yourself. You need to quit criticizing. You need to grow up. I had all this kind of vulgar language to go around what was actually true. And that's the thing, is we all carry the truth. So if you wanted to really, like, in a cosmic sense, say that God has separated itself in some ways through political parties in the U.S. in some ways, of all the ways that God has separated itself, there's one stark reality between the perceived idea of what a Democrat is and should be and the perceived idea of what a Republican is and should be, and both are right. One is, let's be a little more sensitive to each other and kind to each other if we really said a Democrat was really just that. And if we said a Republican is really just get the job done and quit whining, both are right. Like, both are right. And really what it comes down to is, how do you merge this inner child so that it has a safe place to live? Well, you don't blame the president for the way the world is. The president jumped on the train already in motion.
and it's like, when do we become the models for our children that we want them to see? It starts in the home. There are great. It
starts at the home. Nowhere else.
That's where it begins. And those parents that are doing it, our hats are off to you. And we need more of that. And I believe that if, obviously, not every family is going to have a household that is that Leave It to Beaver style, mold of, mother, father, everything, is hunky-dory. It's, there's a lot of tough times out there. People who don't, a lot of beautiful people who don't have parents, who are raised, within the foster care system. And these are beautiful, amazing people that do amazing things. So that's why I always got to make that point that regardless if it's somebody who has a mother and father per se, and have that house in the suburbs and the car and go to that nice suburban school, don't think that you can't succeed, and don't think that you can't be the person that creates reality that goes beyond your wildest imaginations. So to put that out there, it's really indicative, y'all, of the fact that you two, myself, Lisa, people that care enough to talk about these ideas, people that care enough to speak to, whether it's our family, whether it's our nieces, nephews, whether it's in schools, whether it's at the bus stop, people who care enough to have this conversation are the ones that make those changes. A revolution doesn't require bloodshed. A revolution doesn't require all the craziness. It's in one word, it's change. It's change. And if that change, takes time, When you were saying it on the Subjective Perspective show, there's this occurrence right now. There's this awakening occurring, and I concur. I 100% agree with you. I've gone through an awakening. Y'all have. We have here, and it's this enlightenment. It's this period of not just technological enlightenment. It's spiritual enlightenment also. It's the self that we have sought within ourselves. We have become seekers. When we, in the 1970s and 80s, many people were taken by the beginning of the media, because the media was really just starting to skyrocket. At a point right now, not a lot of people even have televisions. It's on their iPhones or on their tablets, and what will that, one day evolve to? We are those people that get to, see it unfold, because you all remember the times before the cell phone, before the beepers, before those electronic leashes, you know what I'm saying? We've seen it unfold, and we're able to see also what the future may hold. That's crazy, because when you talk to somebody who has never seen a day without a smart device, you say, whoa, that's mind-blowing. You know what I'm saying? It's like, whoa, wait a second. You've never seen a world without a smart device. That's where we have to get back to that simplicity. We have to make these tools not extensions of ourselves. And in the words of Ray Kurzweil, who's a futurist, he was on Joe Rogan's show, Joe Rogan Questions Everything. He made a point which is really interesting, that those gadgets, which I'm actually recording myself on right now, those are extensions of ourselves. If there's a question we have, we just type it in, boom, 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 we get it right there. He says one day those will be these devices that we're on right now, these smart devices, these phones with the computers, there'll be just chips implanted in the back of our ears, in the back of our heads right there. And, I can't conceive a world where that would happen. But then again, could you conceive a world that we're doing right now in the 1980s and 90s? This is something that was like crazy talk.
I want to share something with you, Nick, before we get offline. There's something that happened to me in the past 2 days, and while you're talking, it's all starting to make sense to me, and I really want to share this with you. I think it's important. So bear with me for a sec. So yesterday, I was driving back let's backtrack a little bit. So I am very much connected to animals and nature. And usually when they show up in my life, there is a very specific message that I need to connect with. So yesterday, I was driving and I stopped at the red light, and there's this dragonfly that came, and I swear it flew and it was looking at me like this. And it stayed there for a minute, and I was like, what's going on? It was so bizarre. I felt directly connected with it. On my way home to get to this podcast, I saw 2 dragonflies flying above my car again. And I'm like, okay, what's up with that? So I didn't connect energetically with it, but I was doing some reading before about the dragonfly. And while you were talking, it started all to make sense. You are the dragonfly. When you're the dragonfly, I'm the dragonfly, because the dragonfly represent the power of light. And the light is, for me, maybe it's different for you, but it's the inner child, right? It's who we truly are in the first place when we come on earth. It's that light, that energy. And it's interesting because when you think of the dragonfly, I believe most are born in the water. They have a very strong connection to water, but also to the air. Water represents your emotional self. Air represent your cognitive self, so your thoughts and your thinking. And the dragonfly is the capacity to balance between both, but also bring light. And I think it's brilliant that we are in the media, right? We're talking, we're sharing that light, and yet we bring such a good balance to Earth, because dragonfly are extremely flexible, and they're extremely capable of varying and moving from one perspective to the other. And what's brilliant is, and what I read about dragonfly, is that they come in your life to bring you a new perspective on things.
Interesting. That's very cool.
Awesome.
Hence, I'm on the show, the subjective perspective. That's wicked cool, man. Yeah, that's cool. I dig it. We're digging it over here. We're digging it. No, that's cool. I believe I'm into symbolism. I've seen it play out in life, y'all. You too, you know, and whether it's order of numbers, whether it's things that we see that symbolize something, because, you know, this could be all, as they, yes, Plato might make the point with an allegory of the cave, or the idea that everything around me is this figment of what I see here, right? You know, that's interesting. Could it be all truly there? But we know through quantum physics that really this is all just energy, right? These are all just, you know, atoms comprised of God, goodness gracious, hadrons and quarks, and comprised of strings, and that's what they're able to talk about, you know, as the basis of what they know to be the constructs of life. But that could even break down to something totally different and beyond. So goes into this analogy that I always make, y'all. The way that we see the world around us, the complexity, I think really goes into those. I think the questions that we ask as humans, that collective consciousness, I think that the more we become complex in what we're looking for, the more complex there will be. I think that if we start to hone in on those major questions, our own energies, which I think is really a journey of the self, you know, in this world, really looking at it organically, like as a tree grows, as we grow, you know what I'm saying? Like, we may have a start and beginning, we may be infinitely here, and our energies may go through what is that, samsara, right? The cycle of birth and rebirth, and you know, this all may be plausible reality and truth. I don't know what the truth is, because again, if I take it from Elon Musk's perspective, and we talk about simulation, this all being a simulation, you know, and ideas, and not that Elon Musk, you know, created that theory, the simulation theory, the idea that we are living in this simulation, you know, sort of like Sim City, you know, that video game where you control the characters when they sleep, when they eat. Could that be what's happening to us? I'm not saying that is what's happening, but that's a plausible, a speculative theory that somebody could definitely go down and ponder and have a really interesting time. But the same can be said for any religion also, or the idea of the lack of religion, but I also want to talk about for a moment animism, the idea that everything has a soul, the idea that everything is one, and that's an idea that has been around for thousands of years. So the animist, you know, is an idea that, you know, could be taken extreme, but it also could be looked at as having validity nowadays when we talk about the idea of everything being one. And I put that back out to the man, Robert Nesta Marley, One Love, and you know, he saw something big. And that's a story that I think the next time that I have you on the show, we got to get into some cool people that, you know, molded and shaped the culture that we are in, you know, and Bob Marley obviously being one of those people that, even if you weren't into reggae or anything like that, such a huge proponent for shifting people's consciousness in the direction a lot of people would say is of love. And that's the way I looked at Bob, without a doubt.
That's great.
I really enjoyed this, man. I enjoyed that Dragonfly story. It was cool. That was cool, Liz. That was cool, man.
So talking about your radio show, how do people find you?
Thank you so much. Well, I just want to say, Wind, Isabel, you both are absolutely beautiful individuals. Love being a part of this with you. Love talking with you. This was a joy, and I love what you all are doing. Synergy Hour Journey. I support that. Lisa and I support that, the subjective perspective. And on being work at the team, and you guys are awesome. And just keep on rolling. Oh, I was going to ask, sweetheart, can you see, babe, what our 14th episode was?
Oh, yes. I wanted
I
that.
was curious. I was curious who the heck that was. So we'll take a peek. This is number 14. So everybody can check it out, y'all. Right here on my shirt. Been doing that billboard, brand new now.
Be awoke.
BeAwoke.com, and the Subjective Perspective Show is the premiere show on there. Now we have another show from our great friend Dean Chico down in Southern California, and he hasn't put out a new episode in the past year or so, but the episodes he has a bunch of them are awesome. So he's a really, really, really smart dude. Cool. He got to interview Jill Stein while she was running for president. He interviewed Jill Stein, Luke Rudowski, who's a leading citizen journalist, and we were lucky enough to have Dean with us. But the Subjective Perspective, everybody that's checking this out. We're a music duo, Lisa TSP and myself, and I'm just gonna sort of pick this up and show you Lisa TSP for a hot second. So here's Lisa, the Subjective Perspective.
Hey, Lisa.
Jerry. Where's our little Jerry boy? There's our little Jerry boy.
Oh,
hey, little guy.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey, Isabel. He wins. And so we're in our den right now out here in the Central Valley of California, which is, we're about, goodness gracious, about an hour and a half in from San Francisco. Okay. So we spent the last, 8 years in the Monterey Bay and San Francisco Bay Area, right on the coast. And then we came into the valley right next to Yosemite. Actually, we just got married about a month ago now. Today is our 1 month anniversary, actually.
Oh, that's
all right.
And wow, that's crazy. Happy anniversary, baby. And,
I love it.
And right, so I was looking really quick. I'm just gonna, we have so many episodes here. Oh, you know what?
I know, you are amazing. You guys.
Well, either way, I'm trying to find the episodes. We're number 14. That'd be awesome, sweetie. Thanks, baby. And a big shout out. Can you give a shout out to Tommy, baby? To Lee's brother Tommy. And I'm just gonna put that out as a big shout out. And want to give a shout out to Courtney. Out there driving around America with Scotty, and we just saw them down in Bakersfield. They made a stop in from Alabama. So big shout out to you all out there and our families out there across America, out there in New York and across this country, across the world, everybody that knows us. The Subjective Perspective show started 5 years ago, and we said to ourselves when we did this, we were initially on a network called the Bud and Roach Entertainment Network, and two awesome fellas out of Brooklyn, New York. We were living in Cali over here by Salinas, and we were getting our music spun on some stations, and they were out of Brooklyn, and they ended up spinning our stuff. One thing led to another. I ended up getting a monologue on their show, called in one day as just a guest. I had a good convo, ended up having a monologue on the show for like a year, and then after that, I did Oh, yeah, so we had...
Graham Hancock was number 14. Wow.
14 is an honor. This is an honor.
Oh, cool.
Man, so and I said to the guys, I said, yo, man, they asked me if I wanted to have a show because they liked what I did. And I love what they did. So I was like, guys, man, let's make this happen, man, And we were just about ready making it happen. And I said for Lee, I was like, I just want to get anybody that I want to talk to in my life, man. Anybody that I feel like that have something interesting to say, and people that I'm interested in, and people that have done interesting things that could share their perspective. I was like, we're going to do that. And in the words of Steve Wozniak, the engineer behind Apple, he said, smart people leave doors open. And I took that and I applied that to all of this. So we've had all these people on our show, from Noam Chomsky to Graham, which I guess that's an honor. Graham Hancock, we'd like to have you back on, fine, sir. We're definitely going to work to make that happen. But I was like, well, we have something important. We're doing something cool, and we're reaching people. Let's, even if it's one person, we're reaching people. We're reaching a couple people. So put out the message, communicated it, and people that wanted to connect, they were real, man. And in the words of TJ Lavin from MTV and TJ from Great BMX Rider, real recognizes real. And it's so true. You guys are real. And you're going to attract that. Like I'm attracting you. all, and everybody's attracting all those the cool stuff. And for everybody listening in, the Subjective Perspective show, was on the Bud and Roach Entertainment Network, and then this past October, the original creators of the Bud and Roach Entertainment Network, we ended up owning it with them, and we ended up taking this avenue, creating our own network, the Be Awoke Entertainment Network. So Bud and Roach is still on air, and they do awesome stuff. So go check them out at budandroach.com and tell them that Nick TSP sent you. You got to do that, please. But we created Be Awoke Entertainment. So all of our episodes, from all of the years we've done the show, or all under Be Awoke on our page at beawoke.com. So whether it's, Immortal Technique, whether it's Ron Jeremy, anybody we've had on, you go to beawoke.com and just click on the pictures of people, and it'll take you to the archive section. You can hear me speaking for an hour and a half with some of these really, really interesting and iconic people that you'll have a whole nother candid perspective of, because nobody's being controlled by corporate media. This is all stuff that we did from our living room, or at one point we ended up renting a studio, but this is all stuff that we just did from our living room, talking to Bobby Seale. Bobby's an amazing dude, co-founder of the Black Panther Party. I had Bobby on for like an hour and a half, and if you listen to that episode, he gets into stories that are like, wow, man, stuff that you learn in history class. Well, he's right there, talking to you. And I have my history degrees. I have my bachelor's in history. So I was always into that stuff. And I did my master's in social studies education. So I'm an educator, along with being somebody who's into the social fabric of society and history, and doing my doctoral work right over there at UNE, not far from you, ma'am. Yeah. Isabel, you and your other half over there in Portland. And I'm finishing up my dissertation coming up within this year. So it's pretty incredible stuff. And that's in a leadership aspect of transformative leadership and transforming lives, not just leading, but having people see within themselves that they have it in themselves to change also, and to transform people's lives while we're conducting perhaps a direction we're going, and having other people collaborate and maybe change that direction too.
Wow.
That's TSP. That's the Subjective Perspective, everybody. That was a dang joy with you two, Wind and Isabel. Thank you, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on this episode 14 with the word of the day was simple.
Simple. Do we keep it
Love
simple? I'm not sure.
So
that it was all so simple then. I'll give you a little Wu-Tang right there.
I love it.
Ghostface Killer. I was Ghostface Killer right there. It's true.
Well,
Can it be that it was all
on
so
that
simple?
note. Cool. Thanks, everybody, for listening in always.
See you next time, episode 15. We'll have another guest, which is a good friend of mine, so I'll post a little bit more information about it coming soon. All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Love this. I love this, y'all. Thank you, too. Synergy Our Journey. Big supporter. Love you guys, man. Thank you for that.
Thank you.